December is a magical time in my garden. With Christmas on the way, I'm busy adding a bit of sparkle. From festive features to winter colour. Here's how my garden plays its part. Fallen leaves are all over the garden at the moment. When they fall on a lawn, they stop the grass growing simply because they cut out light, they don't allow air circulation, and you'll discover very quickly that underneath the grass will have been killed out and you haven't got a lawn anymore. In small areas, a rake is handy. The wire tooth kind are good for getting dead grass out of the bottom, but that's scarification of the lawn. For just getting the leaves off the top, these plastic tooth rakes are really easy to use. They don't get stuck in the grass, but they're hugely efficient at pulling up the leaves together so you can take them away and do something with them. But with larger areas, well, you need a bit more power. The leaf blower. They're not the quietest thing on earth, but they are hugely efficient for removing leaves over large areas where you'd wear yourself out with a rake. There's no point in just blowing them with no aim in mind, because it'll get windy tomorrow and they'll all get blown back. So what I try and do is make a clear area. I've blown the leaves off this patch already, and then get yourself tarpaulin, one of these garden sheets, spread it out in the area you've cleared, and then you can work on all those leaves that you've blown away, blowing them back into the centre. You can cart them out and put them where you want them. When you start, you'll find that the leaves just blow straight across the tarpaulin, but there's a technique to slowing them down. When you get towards the edge, tilt the blower downwards. That way, they don't travel quite so far. But one thing is certain, when you've gathered them all together like this, you can bag them up and take them away much more easily than if they were blowing all over the place. It's also important to remove fallen leaves from ponds. Decomposing leaves release nutrients into the water, which encourages algal growth and can turn your lovely clean pond a less lovely shade of green. Leaves also suck up oxygen from the water, which can be harmful to any fish you may have. And get them out of your water features as well. They can clog up your pump and filtration system, which can stop them working properly. Another thing to think about are your beds and borders. Way back there among the shrubs, the fallen leaves can be left. They're doing good. They're rotting down, the worms are taking them in and enriching the soil. But further forward, when they fall on small perennial plants and swamp them, they can really kill them out. Look at this little pile of leaves here. It's covering up a heuchera, a tender little perennial. It's not tender in terms of hardiness, it's tough as old boots, but its foliage is quite soft. If you leave the leaves on that little crown there, they're cutting out light, they're holding on to moisture, they're encouraging that crown of the plant to rot. And at the end of the winter, if it's been sitting under leaves all the time, it won't be there, it'll just be brown mush. The same's true of this leucanthemum here, a chrysanthemum relative. Just pull the leaves off them to let the air circulate around them. They're hardy enough then to cope with frost, but they won't succumb to rot because they've been swamped under this damp, rotting blanket of leaves. A little bit of care, and these two will come through to flower again well next year. There's a great temptation to over-tidy the garden, to take up every single fallen leaf, but no, there are places where you can leave them. Further back in the border, underneath the trees and the shrubs, the leaves are doing nothing but good. They've fallen onto the ground, they're not in the way of anything, they're rotting down, the worms are carrying the enrichment into the soil and making it better, and they're a wonderful place for insects to overwinter and for birds to forage for grubs and food. So when you've collected them up, what do you do with them? Well, for me, one of the most offensive sights in the garden is seeing a pile of leaves burning. What a waste, apart from being antisocial with your neighbours. What you can do is just mix them into your compost heap with all the other things like grass clippings, and there they will rot down, and the one helps the other to rot, and it gives you a little bit of tougher material inside your compost. But you can also rot down leaves separately on their own, particularly in a tiny garden where there isn't room to do a big heap like this. Get yourself a black plastic bin liner, pop it on the ground, and with your fork spear it, just to put a few air holes in it, not too many. Then open it up and fill it full of leaves. Now the important thing is that the leaves are damp, and they are at the moment, which is really good. If you put them in dry, they can often just stay dry and not rot much. So make sure they're moist, pop them in there, and if you like, you can sprinkle a bit of soil in and among them to add bacteria, but if they're wet like this and they're a mixture of different kinds of leaves, they will rot down. Now firm them down, you don't want lots of air between them. There's enough air coming in sideways through those holes for ventilation, but by packing down these moist leaves, you'll encourage the rotting to take place more quickly. Once that sack's full, you can tie it up and leave it somewhere, but until you've filled it, keep it weighted down with a bit of stone or a log, and that'll just keep them in there, gently rotting. It'll be a good year before it's ready to use, but it will turn into wonderful brown crumbly leaf mould that makes a great mulch in the garden in spring, seals in moisture, helps keep down weeds, enriches your soil with organic matter, and keeps lots of wildlife happy. Job done. I love summer containers for adding instant colour to your garden, but you can also plant up containers that look beautiful in winter, really putting you in the festive mood. First up, a sophisticated container. I've chosen a pot that's ceramic glazed in a kind of soft dove grey, which I reckon will go with any colour scheme, but inside it a particularly cool mixture of plants. I'm using for all these containers ordinary good peat-free multi-purpose compost. Top a bit more up in there. Don't fill it too full to start with, because you're going to displace some of the compost when you put the pots themselves in. So spread that out, lightly firm it. In the centre, this is Ilex crenata, a good alternative to box. Ilex doesn't get box moth or box blight. I've watered all these plants well, tap them out of their containers. Then fore and aft, I do like a bit of trailing ivy. I've chosen a white variegated variety here rather than a yellow variegated one, because it's going to match much better and tone in with this dove grey pot. So one at the front, one at the back, ease that out, drop that in. I'm going to top up with compost when I've finished planting, so I can leave some of these root balls a little bit proud for now. Don't rush it when you're doing it, just savour the moment. Take your time, being creative. Delightful. That one goes down there. Tuck some compost around it. And then, on either side, cyclamen. Not totally hardy, but where it's seldom frosted, they come through the winter really well. I've got 4 of these, and I'm going to put them in at either side of this ivy at the front. On either side of those 2 cyclamen, these little things. This is called Callocephalus. It always reminds me of wire netting, but it's a lovely blue-grey plant. Again, borderline hardy. Tucking that in. Important with all these things actually not to plant them too deeply, otherwise they get too soggy at the neck, which is where the stem meets the roots. And if you just give them that little bit of lift there, it keeps them clear of the soggy bit. And then all I've got left to put in now are the other 2 cyclamens. And sometimes, you know, a smaller number of plants is more effective than dotting all different kinds of things in. Last one going in. I think that's rather nice. So we've got Ilex crenata in the middle, and ivy going down the front, just breaking up the edge of that pot. 2 cyclamen, 2 Callocephalus, 2 more cyclamen and another ivy. I've got 2 more to go. Time for something a little more rustic. Half a coopered barrel. Lovely word that, isn't, coopering? Making of barrels with these staves here with the metal hoops going round, holding them all together. Half a barrel here. Drainage holes in the base so it doesn't turn into a bog garden through the winter. And again, multi-purpose compost. I'm using just 4 plants. Beauty on a budget. First up, this, a glorious winter flowering hellebore. You gaze into these flowers and you think, how can something be so beautiful at this time of year? And I've already had a bee buzzing round this. Now the technique for getting all plants out of their pots is the same. Take one hand, put it over the surface of the compost, so you're supporting that root ball. Use your heel of your hand to push the pot rim away, and then it's really firmly supported without doing any damage to that root ball. Again, planting it so that the level of compost in the root ball is level with the finished compost in the barrel. The next one to go in is this chap here. Now this is Skimia rubella, a low growing shrub, evergreen. And these flower buds are, I reckon, even more exciting and interesting than the flowers when they open, which are sort of little white stars. But it stays in bud for weeks and weeks and weeks. If you look at this, you will see that there are actually 2 plants in here, 2 for the price of 1. Now, if at the end of the winter you want to plant these out in your garden, separate them, just pull them apart so that each has a good supply of roots. I'm tucking that right down close to this hellebore. You see, they don't grow much in the winter, so you don't need to leave them any space to expand. At the back here, a fern. Now, not all ferns are evergreen. Some of them die down for winter. This is Dryopteris atrata, and these fronds here are going to last. So I'm going to make a hole towards the back there. It's a bit of a background plant. Don't be frightened of green in winter. It's really quite useful for showing off other colours. And alongside what's coming next, and that particular Skimia, it will look really good. Now these are really usually quite pot bound and will take a bit of getting out. Yeah, I thought so. Come on, you can do it. Let's pull, there we are. Cool, look at that. Absolutely solid roots. You're ready for a breather, aren't you? Now look at that with that hellebore, isn't that great? And with that Skimia in front, tucking the compost around it again, as with the others, and making my final hole, which is for a different kind of Skimia. A Skimia that's most attractive when it's in berry. This is Skimmia reevesiana, and these berries here last for weeks and weeks and weeks. Same thing, support it well, take the oh, there's a pot bound plant. How about that? You can tell it's well established, can't you, in its pot? And that is finally going in down here. And you see this woodland feel I've kind of got. It's helped a lot by the fern. And there we have it. I think that's really quite festive, don't you? Good for Christmas. But this has a definite front on it, and it's just about there. And you can see you're now looking at it front on. Look at all your plants when you're planting and face them up, as my boss used to tell me, and then you'll get a container that looks like that. The one plant that is going to give you scent like no other in the winter, you will probably think looks extremely boring. This is it. This is Sarcococca, the Christmas box. And if you look at the flower buds here, these green flower buds, you'll see its potential, because when these open, they turn into white whiskery flowers. Still not much to look at, but I'm not kidding when I say the scent will stop you in your tracks. It's the most fabulous plant, should be in every garden. It's not a sort of headliner, a centerpiece, but in the corner here, it'll offer me a bit of height at one end of this trough. What's going in next? Right in front of it, back to my old friend, the trailing ivy. Now, I used a white one on the city pot. Here, I'm using a yellow variegated one. There we go, in there. Gorgeous. So that's filled that corner up and hidden the bottom of the other plant. And at the back here, a bit more colour I think we're ready for now, aren't we? These winter flowering violas are gorgeous, little winter flowering pansies. And that I'm putting in at the back. Now you might think, oh crumbs, it's not very tall to be put in at the back. You'll see why I'm putting it at the back, because I've got something even shorter to go in front of it. In it goes, down there, compost back around it, and immediately in front of it, a bit of Yorkshire heather. The winter flowering heathers are really useful plants. During the 1960s, a bed full of heather and conifers was so in. It is now so out. But these little heathers, this one's still in bud, rosy pink in bud. In you go. Planted quite close together will give you a lovely bit of winter colour. Glorious feat of nature, really. It's like a miniature conifer, isn't it? And I'm going to pack 3 of these in front of that pansy, which I think they complement really rather well. Have you decided which one you like the most? I'm not finished here yet. Next, our old friend the hellebore, but here a white one, so often called the Christmas rose. It's not a rose at all, but it was always called the Christmas rose. A rose is a flower in the old days, and the Christmas rose, this glorious white one, will flower right the way through December and January. Loads of buds to come on this. Tip it out and lower it into the hole. On this back corner, I'm going for the fragrance again, but this time an aroma rather than a fragrance. Rosemary, a glorious evergreen, fabulous with roast lamb and other delicacies on the dining table. Just crush that foliage. Oh, it's gorgeously rosemary-like. Nothing smells like rosemary, does it? This is going to occupy this back corner. And in the foreground, another bit of ivy to match that one on the other side. Again, the yellow variegated one, picking up the colour here of the fading hellebore flowers. The last thing to go in is another heather. This is a variety of Kaluna, this is a variety of Erica. Both of them heathers, really, but flowers running right the way up those stems. And it's going in that front corner. If you're enjoying the gardening content on the channel, why not subscribe? Every week you'll find new tips, inspiration and ideas to help you transform your own garden. Just one finishing touch. These trails of ivy that are going right across the floor, you can shorten them. It will encourage them come the spring to branch out, and they're not doing any good to anybody right the way down there. So a more lateral display here, still using ivy, this time yellow variegated, to complement this hellebore here. Fragrance from the rosemary, and in a few weeks' time from this sarcococca, the Christmas box. You'll come out of your door and think, I'm glad to be alive. When it comes to watering, always water them in. It settles the compost around the roots. But then, winter containers don't need saturating nearly as often as those in spring and summer. Keep an eye on it, and the chances are, if it's raining every few days, you won't have to water it at all. But if you notice that the surface of the compost is getting a bit dry, give it a soak and don't go back again with the water until it dries out again. And a final thought, place your container where it can be seen through a window. That way, when the weather's rubbish, you can still enjoy it. I love using my garden to decorate the home for Christmas, and today I'm going to show you how to turn your front door into a warm and festive welcome. This is the doorway I'm going to transform. I'm going to put a large pot at either side and plant them up festively, and then the focal point right in the middle, a wreath on the door. There are several different bases you can use for a wreath. You can get these wire frames that you bind foliage into, or one that's ready-made as a base from bits of climbers and twiners. But I do like to use a moss base, not sphagnum moss from our moorlands, which needs preserving, but this is moss raked up from a lawn and bound together around a wire circle. It also holds on to moisture, and that's good. It just keeps the wreath fresher for that little bit longer. Now, there are various bits and bobs here that I'm going to use to attach to the wreath, but the majority of the foliage that's going there I'm going to cut from the garden. What I'm looking for are evergreens in the main and berries. And of course, one plant that is evergreen and berry bearing is the Christmas favourite, the holly. This is a glorious variegated one. It's my favourite. It's called Golden King. When you look at it, this glorious variegation, bright red berries, and I'm just going to snip off a few of these stems and take them back to make me wreath. Beautiful. I've got the holly, therefore I've got to have, haven't I, the ivy. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. But I reckon the ivy deserves a coronet, and in a wreath it's great because it will fill it out. The foliage here is evergreen, and the fruits are formed on ivy at this time of year. And if I take a few sprigs of this off, the foliage will help to mask that wreath base. And there's a lovely sort of architectural quality to the berries themselves. They turn black in time. They're just beginning to go now, and that's when they're tastiest for birds. But look, they're like little explosions, little fireworks, ivy berries, and they'll be a great complement to the holly in my wreath. And berries don't come brighter than these. This is Pyracantha, the fire thorn, absolutely glorious. You can get berries that are either yellow, red, or in this case, orange. It is very thorny, so you might want to wear a pair of gloves unless you're roughy tufty like me. And I'm just going to snip off some of these little stems here that are absolutely laden with berries. If you haven't got berry bearing shrubs in your garden, don't despair. Any evergreens will do. Laurel, Leyland cypress, snipping bits off that. It's got a glorious fragrance. It's just a case of a bit of ingenuity, and you'll end up with something for nothing. I think I've got enough now with the holly and the firethorn to really make an impact. It's a kind of bounteous thing, and that's what they used to use wreaths for. They'd take evergreens out of the garden, showing that life was going on through the winter. It wasn't the end of all things back in the old primitive days. I'm working my way around, keeping the stem bases in one direction. I've got this very thin florist's wire, looping it round there, fastening it off, so it's now anchored to the wreath, and then I can just bind it round and round and round and round, and it'll keep the whole thing held together. A couple of turns on each one, make sure it's fairly secure, so that when it's hung up it's not going to fall off. What I don't have in my garden is this glorious blue spruce, so I managed to buy a couple of branches of this. I'm snipping bits off, and it just gives a lovely, almost frosted effect as I bind it on. I'm quite happily letting it stick out sideways to make the wreath a decent size. Ivy going in now, along with the holly and the spruce. There's no formula, it's just do what you think looks nice, and a good mixture. When I used to work in a Parks Department nursery, we would occasionally make Christmas decorations out of holly and ivy and a bit of mistletoe in. I haven't got any mistletoe, but it's difficult to duck under a wreath for a kiss, isn't it, really? There's a greater sense of achievement about a Christmas wreath that's homemade, especially if you can get children involved. Don't worry about it being too tasteful. If they want to put something gaudy in there, let them do it. I'm trying to be generous here, so it's not too mean. It's really quite overstuffed. Generosity, that's the key, and also making sure that your berries are pretty much to the fore rather than covering them up. I think I'm almost there now. It's a reasonable size. I just need to add a few pine cones and cinnamon sticks. Then a bit of ribbon. Now, do I go bling or tasteful Scottish? I think I'm going to use the middle one. Now I'm just making a bow. This is always the fiddly bit. It's not too dominant. What it does do though is just fills the hole in the middle. If the bow's massive, it rivets all eyes. Here I think it's, well, slightly complementary to my arrangement. So that's my wreath for the door. Now I need to tackle the pots on either side. What I want to do is a pair of matching pots, one either side of the door, and giving them a festive flavour. Nothing is more festive than our old friend the holly. Unlike the variegated one, Golden King, that I cut for the wreath, this is a plain green form with very spiky leaves and lots of berries. This variety is called Alaska, and it's grown as a standard on a single stem, and that means it's the most wonderful statuesque centerpiece for a large pot like this. Now there's a neat trick you can use here, because although I could tap this plant out of its pot and plant it properly in the pot, I might want to put it in the garden come spring, so I'm going to leave it in its pot in here and plunge it. So plant all the other things around it. But with this holly, to make sure I can just lift it straight out come spring and plant it in the garden. I'm leaving it in its container. It'll come to no harm at all. I'm going to need a bit more compost all around it. This is multi-purpose peat-free compost with added John Innes, and John Innes contains a bit of soil, and that means you get greater stability in a winter container when it's quite windy. And around it I'm going to put a bit more winter colour. It's a Christmas container, therefore it'd be churlish not to have a Christmas rose in it, wouldn't it? It's not a rose at all, of course, the Christmas rose. It's a hellebore, Helleborus niger, and it's beautiful. Look at all the buds that are about to open on here, loads of them. So it's going to be colourful for weeks on end. And the great thing about winter flowering plants, because the weather's colder, they don't go over nearly so quickly, they last much longer. I'm putting it in the front because I think it's quite impactful, because either side of it I want to put something really bright and cheery. Ta-da! These skimmias are sold in pots now. If you look at this, there are 3 plants in here. These are 3 rooted cuttings. They flower and berry when they're quite young, and you get a really good potful for your money. I'll tuck that in. Now remember, in winter you don't need to give them room to grow, to spread sideways, because they won't. So put them really cheek by jowl to give yourself the greatest spectacle from all these plants. So it's a really solid display. Now that's one skimmia on one side. This one is slightly different. This is Skimmia reevesiana. See, the berries are that much more subtle, a little bit duller red. I just thought it's nice to have a slightly different one on either side. I always like a bit of a trailer in my pots, and variegated ivy, particularly at Christmas, is great. I'm going to pop that down here, one on either side, so they sort of frame these other plants. One down there and another on the other side. A bit more white, I think, from these white skimmias. This is O'Berry's white, as opposed to O'Berry's red. I like a bit of brightness at Christmas, especially with light levels being low. You can afford to be that much more vibrant in your colour schemes than in the middle of the summer when light intensity is high. And now the final plant is green, and it's another skimmia, this time Japonica finchii. And here is a plant that's in bud, green buds, and they do look gorgeous, don't they? So that will come out of its pot and go right in the back. And you can see now what I've done, because as well as playing around with colours, I've also contoured this pot, giving it a front and a back, and that means that it's lower at the front there, rising up at the back. You've now got a lovely slope which is showing you off. For maximum impact, I'm mirroring the look of the first pot by planting another, using exactly the same plants. And I've dropped in a couple of ferns just to complete the look. There we are. What was just really rather a handsome but not necessarily bright and sparkly and Christmassy potting shed door has become really rather inviting now, don't you think? I'm pleased with them. I'll be coming in and out of this potting shed every day, singing to myself, God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay, because I've got holly and ivy to cheer me every day. I'm starting at number 12 with the one that actually doesn't look much like a plant at all, because at the moment all it is a bulb. The Hippeastrum amaryllis. It comes in a box. Here's a double crimson one, and here a lovely striped white and pink variety. The origins of the name amaryllis are rooted in mythology, but it's meant to symbolise perseverance and renewal, which means it's a good plant to think about at Christmas. Pot it, but make sure that the top half of the bulb is sticking out of the compost, and the compost needs to be barely moist. Stand it on the windowsill. It's perfectly happy in centrally heated rooms, and wait, and eventually that flower spike, looking like an agricultural show loudspeaker, will emerge from the top of the bulb. An absolute corker. At number 11, the most famous Christmas shrub of all, the holly. Tough as old boots, it'll grow in almost any soil, in sun or shade. And you know the carol, the holly and the ivy, when they're both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. The holly is meant to symbolise Christ, and the ivy, the Virgin Mary, because she cared for Christ. At number 10, a very popular plant, cyclamen. There's a bee come, look, isn't that nice? Bees at this time of year, they like cyclamen almost as much as I do. Cyclamen love it cool and they love it bright. They're not wild about central heating, and they're not wild about being kept too soggy. So if I were you, I'd put this plant on a windowsill. If you want to be really safe, wait until it just starts to wilt because that compost is dry. Then give it a soak. You can keep it in a saucer if you want, fill the saucer with water and let it soak it up. But then don't water it again until it's slightly dry. At number 9, the gloriously fragrant hyacinth. The hyacinth has been associated with Christmas since Victorian times, because it was the Victorians who forced them into bloom early, and that meant we could enjoy the fragrance at Christmas. This is the stage at which to buy them in your local nursery or garden centre or store, when the flowers have left the bulb and are beginning to show colour. If they're too far down in there and they're green, then the leaves can grow too fast, the centre can topple over. When the buds like this, the clusters have cleared those bulbs, you can see what we call this neck here, then it's safe to bring them in. And this whole flower spike will emerge, fatten up, and it'll be like a great big Christmas drumstick. Bright blue in this case, and you won't need an air freshener in your rooms over Christmas. This will take over from the turkey. At number 8, the hellebore, the Christmas rose. This is not a rose at all, but we've always called this the Christmas rose because it's in bloom at Christmas. So this is not a house plant. This is a plant for outdoors. If you have a table outside your window, you can stand it on the table and enjoy these flowers in all but the bitterest of weather. They may go down when it's really frosty, but they'll pick up again as soon as it becomes milder once more. And then you can plant it out in the garden and really enjoy it in future years. Anybody would be happy with this gift, especially my friendly bumblebee. At number 7, let's think about Christmas dinner. Let's think about stuffing. Thyme. It's really a hardy plant, so it grows best outside. It's tough as old boots, quite an evergreen. You can see how strong it is in the stem. And if you grow it outside, grow it near the kitchen door, because then whatever the weather, you can nip out and get a bit of it to chop up and use in your stuffing for the Christmas goose, the Christmas turkey, whatever it is you're having. It's a good flavoursome herb, and it absolutely reeks of Christmas. Glorious. At number 6, a particular favourite of mine, the Christmas azalea. Now this is the Indian azalea, Azalea indica. It's not fully hardy in this country, so it's grown as a houseplant. The important thing about this plant is that you do not ever let it dry out. You'll find it's in very fibrous compost and it likes to be kept constantly damp. This is a soft dusky red one. I had one a couple of years ago that I potted up because its flowers were such a glorious colour. And it's this one in a large terracotta pan that I've kept going. What they also need when you pot them on is ericaceous compost that hasn't got lime or chalk in it, and acid compost, because azaleas and rhododendrons love acid soil. And don't you just love that flower? That's why I'm so fond of it. And the Christmas connection? Well, it flowers at Christmas and it's grown to sell at Christmas, and that'll do for me. One thing that isn't a part of my 12 plants for Christmas, but really ought to be because I love it at Christmas, are my topiary yews, these cones I've clipped. Because if you string little tiny fairy lights round them, they look absolutely glorious. Christmas trees, yew trees and box trees that last all the year round, but particularly come into their own in the festive season. At number 5, rosemary. Now you may think this is rather like the thyme, it's just a Christmas herb, perfect for roast lamb. It is, nothing wrong with that at all, but it does have a Christmas association. The Virgin Mary allegedly dried the clothes of the infant Jesus on a rosemary bush in the sun, and it was known then as the Rose of Mary. And you know, when it's grown in this sort of shape, with some of those tiny little fairy lights on it, the Rose of Mary becomes rather a nice little Christmas tree, don't you think? Number 4 is this little beauty here. This is the Christmas cactus. The Christmas cactus blooms at this time of year, hence its common name. But the amount of bud on this, these flowers extend and the petals come back. There's a series of sort of stacked petals on it. They can be white, or in this case, this more common sort of cerise pink. It likes a position in reasonably good but not brilliant sunshine, and keep that compost moist only when it starts to dry out. And then you'll see that these flattened stems stay nice and plump. It does really well if you get several of them and plant them in a hanging basket. When I worked in the parks department, we had one big basket and the plant cascaded over the sides, and we used to hang it with great pride in the town hall every Christmas. At number 3, the bay tree. This is Laurus nobilis. You know, when you see a statue or a painting or an engraving of Julius Caesar and he's got this sort of crown of foliage around his head, it's this, it's the bay, the victor's bay. And of course, from our point of view in the garden, it's a glorious evergreen with this wonderful aroma when you crush it, and brilliant in cooking. It's a wonderful Christmas plant. This one especially wrapped for Christmas in a little hessian bag with a red ribbon. At number 2, one of our most popular houseplants, the moth orchid. This is Phalaenopsis. It is now so popular, you may think, oh, I never want to see another one, but it's great to give as a present, particularly for someone who lives in a warm flat or a house, because it does quite well with central heating. It's a plant from warmer climes than ours. The thing to do is to make sure it's got plenty of buds coming at the end of the stem. This one here is now in full flower, but if you buy one where the end of the stem has got lots of buds on it, then you know it's going to last for weeks on end. When it comes to watering, you can run rainwater through this pot here, which is full of bark chips, let it drain, but then you don't need to do that any more than once every week or 10 days. It is a handsome plant, very statuesque, and it does feel very exotic and sophisticated. You think, oh, that's rather a nice present. At number 1, the plant that everybody associates with Christmas, the poinsettia. Now, if somebody says they're lovely red flowers, no, they're not. They're lovely red bracts, because the flowers are these tiny little things in the centre. These are just coloured leaves. The leaves closest to the flower colour up. In this case, the traditional scarlet come crimson come red poinsettia. We also get them nowadays in bright pink like this, and also speckled. When you buy your poinsettia, always buy it from somewhere warm, a garden centre or nursery for preference, but even in the stores they will have been kept warmer than they would outside on a street display. It really should be wearing a sombrero, being from Mexico, not a woolly scarf. What they love best is being stood on a tin tray with gravel on it that can be kept moist, and that way the evaporation of the water will keep the environment around them really pleasantly humid. The association with Christmas, there are lots of little legends, but the one I like is that the arrangement of these brightly coloured bracts at the top is representative of the Star of Bethlehem. Isn't that glorious? So whether you have a garden or an apartment, and whether that apartment is warm or on the cool side, there is something in the Christmas firmament of plants and flowers that will suit you down to the ground. For me, give me a nice plant of holly in the garden, and I'm a happy man. Happy Christmas. I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported the channel this year, and to wish you the most wonderful Christmas. If you haven't yet subscribed, just click below. There's plenty more content to come.